19. Back to normality and tourists in Agartha. The day dawned sunny and summery, with birdsong and the scent of flowers, warm ground, and trees. My wife and I were sitting in the arbor when Manel turned up. "The holiday is over," he cried out. "It's time to get back to work." We sighed and climbed into the waiting hovercraft. "There are newcomers who need to know about this part of the planet," Manel explained. "We need Cecilia to give a short introduction on Telos, as they won't get further than that. They came through Mount Shasta, but they don't really believe they're awake yet. They think they're dreaming. They'll have to wake up sometime." The tourists were waiting in the meadow near the entrance to Porthologos. Grandmother, Lex, and Titch were among them, so I joined them because I still wanted to know more about Agartha, which I was now attached to for eternity. People were sitting on the grass, excited and expectant. Manel was among them, smiling and talking, probably in an attempt to calm them down, as they didn't know where they were. I thought about coming here, by accident, to my mind, and imagined they had all had a similar experience. There were about 20 adults, but no children other than Wendy and Pierre. Cecilia was utterly charming. It was as though my wife projected a supernatural beam into each of us. "Welcome," she called. "If you are wondering where in the world you are, I'm about to inform you. This town is Telos, and it is in the subterranean part of the earth, the existence of which you have not yet acknowledged. You only recognize 7 continents: Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, South America, Oceania, and Antarctica. According to you, this continent inside the earth does not exist. But I'm telling you it does, even physically for the 3-dimensional people here. Telos is the largest town, apart from the capital, which is called Shambhala. None of our towns here are like your noisy cities, where evil lurks around every corner. This is the kingdom of eternal peace, which you pine for with nostalgia on the surface. Yes, nostalgia. Originally, we Agarthans are from the surface, just like you. There are books about us, but they are not bestsellers. You imagine a hollow earth country to be gray and dangerous. But it's not like that, as you can see. As far as technology is concerned, we are light years ahead of you surface dwellers. We hope to share our knowledge with you in the future. That future is closer than you think. The network of Agartha embraces 120 underground towns. The inhabitants of these towns are descended from the advanced civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria. I'm sure you are wondering, how can we have our own sun here, providing good weather and verdant foliage? The Earth's crust is approximately 800 miles, 300 kilometers, thick. The planet isn't solid, so the center of gravity isn't in the center of the Earth, but in the Earth's crust, about 400 miles, 650 kilometers, underground. The source of the Earth's magnetism has long been a mystery. The inner sun in the center of the Earth is the mysterious source of Earth's magnetism. It shines upon us here. There was an inventor at the end of the 19th century called Nikola Tesla. At that time, there were many entrances into the Earth's hollow interior. Tesla discovered that electricity could be harnessed in unlimited quantities to power all machinery, without the need for coal, oil, gas, or any other environmental pollutant. He placed this technology in the public domain, and people began to abuse entry to the Earth's interior, so that we had to seal off many portals, and they remained sealed. Tesla himself vanished, and actually he is here, but less physical than you these days. Many million Catharians live here in the hollow Earth. Catharians also live on Jupiter. I'm telling you this because the Catharians are a strange people. They are incredibly tall, even in their stocking feet. More than 36,000 people from the surface live here now. In the last 200 years, about 50 people have arrived from the surface, but in the last 20 years, 8 people have moved here permanently. Some of the newcomers are with us now, and other visitors are arriving, like you today. We have an enormous library called Porthologos. It contains documents from the entire universe. It is under the Aegean Sea, between Greece and Turkey, but nowadays no longer has a direct link with the surface. We call it a library, although it doesn't contain many books. We have historical stories related dramatically. It's like theater, but more so. There is much more in Porthologos, which we will show you, in part at least. The young man looked harassed. How do you know my name? He snapped. In Italy, where I come from, we Catholics don't allow any mumbo-jumbo. The Pope, my father, wants us to keep to the Holy Scripture. The Pope is your father? I asked, flummoxed. Do you mention that in Italy? You must have been a sin of his youth, surely? I don't think so, Valencio replied calmly. That's why I'm traveling. I found out about Agartha from one of the high priests, Cardinal Riamfort. He's French and has always been kind to me. I know what goes on behind the scenes at the Vatican. That's why they're looking for me now. I'm a wanted man. I've always longed to be anywhere apart from where I grew up. I think I'd like to stay here. What religion do you believe in? You do have a religion? Tourists are allowed to stay for 2 days, I commented. I relented when I saw the look of disappointment on the boy's face. I can ask, if you really want to stay longer. You'll have to ask my wife about religion. Cecilia gestured to the boy to sit, and he sat down at her feet. I was brought up in a monastery, he said. We were treated cruelly and beaten with a stick. When I finished school, I was forced to live at the Vatican as a kind of novice. My relationship to the Pope was completely hushed up. My father pretended not to recognize me, even though sometimes I had to serve him. He never looked me in the eye. The only friend I had was Cardinal Riamfort, and he taught me much more than Greek and Latin. Otherwise I was regarded as a thug, although I tried to be as observant as possible. My attentiveness meant that I noticed much that was taboo. I can tell you more of this later. Riamfort told me the earth was hollow and that you could get here by sea, or via Mount Shasta. I ran away. I stole some money that was lying around and took a plane to South America. It was easy. Now I'm wanted for stealing, although I consider the money mine by right, as I was never given a penny, while the old men in the Vatican drank and ate well and were sensuous in the bargain. He paused for breath, and I interrupted. Valencio, I said. Thank you for being so honest. You should really be locked up, but we don't do that here. I'll speak to the powers that be and see what they say. Until then, you can live with Edmund, who has 2 scamps you can help look after. Edmund had listened to this confession in its entirety and couldn't help laughing. The Vatican, oh my goodness, the Vatican, he chuckled, slapping his thighs. He can certainly live with us, there's plenty of room. He can't steal money here, but maybe he should send some precious stones to His Holiness the Pope, when he has earned some, with a politely respectful, affectionate letter. Valencio looked confused, but then giggled too. I tried to look strict, but it's not one of my strong points. How old are you? I asked the boy. 19, soon 20, was the reply. Please don't return me to the surface. The Vatican has spies everywhere, and I'll be taken into custody at Mount Shasta. Cardinal Riamfort will guess where I am, although he won't tell. He's the only one of them who has a decent heart. Politics and religion, exclaimed my new grandfather, Lex. My dear Cecilia, what are your views on these important subjects? My wife's smile froze on her face. It was obvious that these subjects were not dear to her heart. Actually, Lex, my dear, we don't really get involved, she replied. Throughout Agartha, we have only one religion, our belief in the eternal source, the dwelling place of love. There aren't any dissenters or freethinkers. We are all one in this love. We call our belief the faith of light. Everything is one in love. Yes, but who is in control here? Somebody or some group must govern the country. It was Edmund's turn to ask, and Valencio's face reflected wonder and anxiety. Of course, I replied. We are governed by a council of 12 masters. 12 is the magic number for endings. That's why Mayan culture has predicted changes to the Earth in 2012. I know, but you aren't allowed to mention that in the Vatican, retorted Valencio. I have my own religion in my mind. My Father is in heaven, as he doesn't acknowledge my existence on earth, Pope that he is. I realized the sense of bitterness this young man felt towards his father and his tough upbringing. "Is your mother alive?" I asked. "No," Valencio replied, and I could see he was fighting back tears. A man isn't allowed to cry was still part of his worldview, formed by rigid monks in secret, where a strict God judged the human heart. "My mother died a few months after my birth," the dark-haired boy continued. "I don't think she died of natural causes. They said she died of complications after giving birth, in an effort to blame me. Cardinal Riomfort helped relieve my conscience. My mother was the daughter of a rich, respected nobleman who owned large estates in southeast Italy, near the Pope's childhood home. She was disowned and cast out by her parents, who looked upon me as a bastard with no right to live. I probably would have been killed if Cardinal Riomfort hadn't argued my case, and I was taken in by thick-skinned monks instead. That's my life history. I would like to stay here. The monks taught me well: astronomy, geology, advanced mathematics, French, English, and Latin, of course. Might I be of some use?" "We'll see what we can do," answered Cecilia gently, giving the boy a lovely smile. "Any more questions before we split up? Are there taxes here, or don't you use money at all? How do you pay for things when you buy food, clothes, or houses? Or are you just allocated these things? Doesn't anybody earn a wage?" My inquisitive grandmother was on the case again. "Not in the same way as on the surface, grandmother," I replied. "We exchange goods, and there are centers for goods everywhere. We take only what we need, and return things when we have finished using them. We swap with each other. We make things ourselves. The 4-hour working day is very intense, and if we can't organize something, there is always someone else to help with planning or whatever. We don't buy, we share." "What about law and order, then? Are there police, lawyers, and judiciary?" These questions came from Lex. "We have laws, yes," I answered. "The legal system is ancient. There has been democracy here since the beginning of time. Agartha's network is responsible for our safety underground. Cases that arise and need solutions are considered individually and judged in God's light and the holy code of justice. Our long lives provide experience and wisdom. There aren't many difficult cases here. Many of the ancients here lived on the surface originally, and know how to differentiate between good and bad. I think we should sleep on this until a new day brings us new energy." Edmund called out, with 2 slumbering children at his side. Titch gave a short bark and raised his enormous weight, looking inquiringly at me and Cecilia. Valencio went with Edmund and the children. A small fleet of hovercraft waited patiently in the rose-colored light which came at the end of the bright golden day, bringing promise of the heavenly cradle of sleep. 20. The purpose of pets. We were awakened by Titch's indiscreet scratching and panting. It was time for the next stage in discovering the culture of this remarkable land. I suddenly thought of something at breakfast, and I was devastated. "Cecilia, what about your parents?" I asked suddenly, seizing her hands, which had been busy crumbling her bread. "What about them?" she asked, putting some bread into her mouth. "I've always presumed they were dead," I said. "You've never talked about them. We should have invited them to our love union if they're alive. Do you have any siblings?" "We've actually forgotten to talk about these things," replied my wife. "My parents live in the 5th dimension, a long way away. They know of our union and gave their approval. So far, you can only see 3 dimensions, so you wouldn't have noticed if they had come. I have a sister and a brother. They are also 5-dimensional, but you can meet them all when you're ready. I crossed the boundary when I lived in Telos for a while. It's not the first time I've been 3-dimensional, as I love Earthlings and want to help educate them. Now I'm married to one, although you will also become 5-dimensional. Now I really don't understand," I sighed. "If you were 5-dimensional, I wouldn't be able to see you. I know there are both kinds in Telos. And you know that 5-dimensional beings have the capacity to transform themselves when they want," interrupted my wife. "But, if we have children," I stammered. "What would happen to them? Would they be a mixture?" Cecilla's peal of laughter removed my anxiety. "You've got a lot to learn," she hooted. "The things you don't understand yet." She got up from the table and danced into the garden, with me following. Manel was there. "I was just about to visit you turtle doves," he said, smiling. "Arniel wants to see you, remember, Tim?" I was a bit embarrassed that I'd forgotten. Manel apologized to Cecilla for leaving her alone on this beautiful morning, and then I was off in his hovercraft, wondering if I would learn anything exciting, like how to become five-dimensional. "Not yet," Manel said, obviously reading my thoughts. "It's not far off, but you have some work to put in first." "That stuff about dimensions," I started to say, "is very complicated." My friend finished the sentence. "Here we are." I jumped down. Titch had volunteered to stay with Cecilla. He loved her and the garden, and she liked playing with him. Like many other buildings, the one before us now was inlaid with jewels. The interior glittered with gold and other precious metals in ingenious patterns. Arniel was sitting in a comfortable armchair, gesturing for us to sit down. "Now you're a serious member of Agarthan society, Tim." He smiled. "You have married the daughter of original inhabitants. This makes us happy, and we offer our congratulations. But there is a genetic disparity, in that Cecilla has more genes than you. Now you're married to a native, we'll have to transfer some more to you. At the same time, we want you as our special envoy to interact with the surface. It's possible to do both. We need people like you on the surface. Things may be different now you have a family, which may well grow. You need to learn more telepathy and many other magic tricks, as you like to call them. We have put this off until you were really one of us. Manel will come for you every day, and lessons will take place in a variety of locations, starting tomorrow. That is my message." I was pleased with this, and so was Cecilla. It was a four-way celebration, as grandmother and Lex threw an Earth-style party for us. Even my little Titch was invited. He always knew something special was going on when he wore his wide red collar with gold studs and a rosette. So far, we hadn't met any pet dogs. I wondered why, and decided to find out more about pets in this world. There's no real difference between morning and evening in Agartha. The sun always shines. We decide ourselves how we want to divide up the day, and we sleep when we need to. Many people keep regular hours, just as on Earth. As we trotted over to grandmother and Lex's, we decided it was evening. Actually, we hovered across, our feet carefully above the ground. We'd learned how to do this, and it's not as weird as it sounds. In this way, we didn't destroy any plants. My grandmother had set out a Swedish smorgasbord, as far as possible. Swedes love their smorgasbord and like to indulge, even abroad. Grandmother still had some treats she had brought with her, like crisp bread, ginger thins, and dried meat. All we needed was schnapps and beer, but instead, we had wine from Telos. Manel was invited too, and seemed somewhat confused to see the groaning table. He kept to the vegetables from Telos. Titch was given a meaty bone and danced around in delight. "I'm going to take this opportunity to ask a question," I said, as we were sitting outside among trailing flowers and leaves. Grapes grew like a roof over us, and the scents from the warm ground were almost overwhelming. "Do people keep dogs here, or are they considered unclean, like in Oriental countries on the surface?" "Don't worry." Manel smiled. "There are all kinds of pets here. But we don't walk them like you do. We always have a purpose if we're walking, and it may be difficult to take a pet along. We use cats and dogs therapeutically when necessary. Don't you up there," he lifted his hand to point at the roof of grapes, "realize the healing properties of cats, dogs, and horses? There aren't any healers here who don't use them in their treatment. It's important to keep the animals clean and cultivate their intelligence properly. They're not allowed to run around willy-nilly. Does that answer your question?" I stroked Titch as he sniffed my arm, which obviously smelled interesting. "What a shame he hasn't learned that," I commented. Manel's smile widened. "Titch is going to learn all about it. He's coming on our field trip tomorrow. He'll be learning at the same time as you." That sounded great, if mysterious. I was being educated with my dog. That was a slightly mad thought. 21. Lessons begin. So what happened to Valencio? He came to grandmother's party. We had quite a good chat about his escape, his misgivings, hopes, and great sadness that his father didn't care for him. He regarded himself as an orphan and wanted to stay with us. Manel promised to ask the Galactic Council if they could give him a home in Agartha, or another planet. In the meantime, he lived with Edmund and the children, where he was very popular. It seemed that Cecilia knew more about the lessons Manel would provide than I had supposed. When I expressed concern at leaving her so soon after our love union, she consoled me that it wouldn't be for long. Many lessons could take place at home, and she would be there too. Apart from that, she had her own daily chores, and I had to remember that no one worked longer than 4 hours each day in Agartha. After that, your time was your own. It was strange how all tasks seemed to fit into the allotted time. This could be achieved on Earth, too, if people were more disciplined. Manel arrived punctually the next morning. I had come to rely upon this tall, slim man with his long, blonde hair and friendly demeanor. I felt totally secure with him. Titch did too, and showed his enthusiasm as we got into the hovercraft. He wagged his tail constantly and tried to push between Manel and me, not easy in such a small space. The hovercraft stopped in the countryside outside Telos. As I stepped out, I could see a farmer working in a wheat field. We walked over to him. He was carrying a seed bin on his shoulders and sowing the seed by hand. I was surprised, as I knew how easy this would be with a tractor, on the surface. Suddenly, a host of nature spirits appeared, elementals as tall as humans, yet so fragile they were hardly visible at first. "We work with nature spirits here," remarked the farmer, shaking my hand firmly. "They check that the seeds are in the right position to maintain vitality. That's the secret of all the seed here, its vitality remains in all you eat." Devashiren to return to the surface to help. "Close your eyes, Tim," Manel ordered. I closed them. When I was allowed to open them again, we were in the middle of a field of golden wheat, glowing with ripeness. The farmer at our side laughed and called, "This is what you get if you don't spray it with rubbish, but allow the crop to grow as it will." I could see it was excellent grain, even if there was an occasional cornflower, poppy, or daisy adding an undeniable charm to the mass of gold. "You have to remember," Manel observed, as we walked with the farmer, "that on the surface you ship food from all over. Food imported from other lands cannot increase your vitality, as it doesn't receive the right local encouragements. It introduces something alien into your body, which often strikes a discordant note with your inherited frequency. In fact, you could say that you are consuming the thoughts and feelings of unfamiliar people, and these are then transferred to you. This affects your internal organs, unbeknownst to you. Ingesting thoughts from other countries may increase fears and phobias previously dormant. You're left wondering where those thoughts and ideas came from. Is that true?" I yelled in horror, feeling like a cannibal. "I just want to be myself." "You are yourself, don't panic." Manel laughed, thumping me on the back. "But surface dwellers will have to return to nature. Things aren't looking good for them." While we were talking, Titch had been sniffing around and cocking his leg here and there. When he sat down to do his business, I tried to stop him, but the farmer restrained me. "The best manure we have comes from animals," he said. "We bring manure from towns and houses to use on arable land. Human excrement is pulverized in situ, and mixed with dung to a sandy, non-smelly powder. The best growth is the result of natural manure, not artificial like they use up there." He pointed skywards. It was strange to think of artificially fertilized fields hanging just over our heads. Of course, it was a good way off. We were in the hovercraft again. "That was a great lesson," I beamed. "I'm glad there are farmers here, and that they reap a good harvest without too much effort." "It's not a matter of effort," Manel answered. "We are willing, and we work hard. It owes a lot to the goodwill of Mother Earth, as we don't add artificial fertilizer. Now we are going to have a lesson on beliefs." 22. The Temple of Belief and a Meeting with Melchizedek. We talked about religion yesterday when your grandmother mentioned it, Manel remarked, as the hovercraft stopped in a circular garden with a small building in the center. We alighted and Titch became interested in sniffing the huge number of bushes. The small, round building was like all other buildings, exquisitely beautiful and decorated with precious stones in an ornamental pattern. This is a temple, Manel told me. We don't have churches and priests of various beliefs as on the surface, but we do have small temples where a priest and priestess act as a link to the Godhead. There's only one divine power. We are aware of that here, and if we aren't, we soon discover it. Come with me. I trotted after my friend with the long, fair hair, into the round building. A wide beam of light fell from the open roof. I couldn't understand where it came from. I knelt down like Manel, it felt right. I felt encircled by the light, overwhelmed by gentle warmth as all tensions and unwelcome thoughts dissolved and vanished. I was the light and the light was me. It wasn't just a lovely thought, it was the truth. The existence was literally an existence made of light. I don't know if I was asleep or having a vision. I had knelt in respect for the light and had closed my eyes. When I opened them, I was sitting on a soft sofa in front of the wide light beam. A voice came from it and I shivered with goose pimples. It was so holy, so sacred. Humans, human children. A wonderful existence was created for you on beautiful, tranquil earth, as part of a great family. You worked together, ate and drank together, slept together, and life was all enjoyment, beauty, and love. Above all, love. This lasted for a relatively short time. When darkness came forth and nearly extinguished the light, you were blinded by acceptance. You accepted a life of love and you accepted, without question, the encroaching darkness. You believed things were as they should be. This became a new lifestyle and encouraged alien influences and dark deeds. The darkness seeped into your minds in many ways, often disguised as light. You invented religions, which was unnecessary, as there is only one God consciousness. You gave this God as many guises as grains of sand on a beach. You believed you had chosen or inherited a religion full of mysticism, stimulating your brains. You were unquestioning. You were caught in your own trap and were inspired to struggle, to be envious and jealous. Golden mammon was the root of all inspiration. All this is going to change, isn't it? I objected. The new belief for the new age will be in one leader, the God within us who leads to the highest source. Well answered, Timothy. You may proceed. The voice was happy and friendly, and Manel patted me gently on the shoulder. You're one of us officially now, Tim, he whispered. You have met one of the holy ones. Do you have those here too? I wondered in surprise. I didn't think you had holy ones as we do on earth. We don't. Manel sounded slightly offended. This is a help center. Our temples welcome all those in need of help and support. Our priests and priestesses are wise, highly developed beings who can cure mental disorder and other problems. I wanted you to know that there are centers like these across our world. You ought to have them too. I am no longer an earthling, I interrupted him. But these places would definitely be useful on the surface. It's nice to know there are temples like these. Everyone comes here, Manel replied. There are parties, singing, dancing, and various meetings. The temples have all kinds of uses, apart from protection and sanctuary for those who most need it. And it doesn't cost a thing. This last sentence was accompanied by a peal of laughter. The hovercraft was outside, as was Titch, progressing slowly and calmly from shrub to shrub, his tail held high. He nearly bowled us over with happiness when we eventually emerged from the strange house. The journey continued. We alighted at the entrance to a magnificent, circular amphitheater with stairs descending to an oval stage. I thought it was the Colosseum at Rome. On the stage was a large oval table. 12 men and women were seated around it. I realized it was the Council of 12 in Telos. Let's go and meet them, suggested Manel eagerly. We don't want to disturb them. I didn't want to end up in an investigation, which was none of my business. We won't. Come on, Tim and Titch. He hurried down the circular flight of stairs, and I followed doubtfully. Titch was busy trying to smell everything. As we arrived, a man rose and embraced Manel and then me. It was Saint Germain. Titch was patted too. Welcome. Sit by me, Tim, and learn a little about our society and the problems which arise here. I looked around the table. Saint Germain explained who the people were and the offices they held. There were 6 men and 6 women. An equal distribution, I remarked. That doesn't happen on Earth. There are no differences in the rights of men and women here, Saint Germain replied. The council discusses and makes decisions about possible crimes, which are rare, arguments between neighbors, also rare, food problems, and new nourishment ideas. And, of course, our eternal discussion, the surface of the earth and how we can save it. Great things are happening up there, he pointed to the sky, and there will soon be changes for the Earthlings. They have manhandled our wounded planet so harshly that the damage is obvious even here. We can't allow that. But who can control the wind? No one can. So something must be done before things decline seriously for us, because of the negligence and ignorance of Earthlings. A woman was speaking. She looked middle-aged, tall, dark-haired, and beautiful. Her name was Lady Nada. I lived on the earth a long time ago, she continued. At that time, singing was a great experience, and there were many genres for various voices. Now singing seems to be an incessant out-of-tune screech. There are no melodies. Very few singers have any training like we had. The music now played on Earth is damaging the planet. It damages the people who listen and the energy of the tones. Music can be exalting, but it is destructive when there is no harmony. I want to help with those changes. The music of the spheres shall be restored to Mother Earth. There was approval of this, and some clapping. The imminent changes will include even your work, my dear Lady Nada, remarked a man's voice. I'm Melchizedek, King of Kings, and I'm going to introduce some sense to these Earthlings. Good manners and positive thinking. The man was incredibly impressive. He was tall and strong, yet lithe. He had long, wavy dark hair and his eyes were bright and captivating. They were brown with golden flecks. He had a clear and handsome profile, emanating strength and love. I thought there was something Indian in his appearance. His smile was incredibly bright and friendly. When he smiled, you smiled too, and enjoyed smiling in his company. At the moment, most of our meetings in Agartha are about helping our Earth neighbors, Saint Germain resumed. This boy, he was indicating me, will help us. He hasn't been here long, and has just married our Cecilia. Everyone cheered, and I could feel myself blushing. Manel saved the day. We're on a field trip, he called. Please may we return for further information at a later date? We bowed low and respectfully to the distinguished assembly, and Manel and I retreated. Titch didn't. He circled the whole table, sniffing at each person, being patted, and licking in return. When he came back to us, he stood up on his hind legs, a gesture which denoted approval. He was entitled to the ensuing applause. The loyal, or previously programmed, hovercraft was waiting for us. I felt exhausted after the council meeting, and Manel suggested that we should continue the next day. Thus I hurried home to my waiting wife. End of section 22. If you find this audiobook useful, please subscribe to my channel, Rapid Reads.